I never suspected cheating at first. What I suspected was that my wife had started treating me like a stranger she had to tolerate. We'd been together for 12 years, married for 8, no kids, comfortable life. The kind of marriage people describe as quiet but solid. We didn't fight much. We didn't need to, or so I thought. The first thing that changed was how she spoke to me. Shorter sentences, neutral tone, no warmth, no edge, just distance. When I tried to joke, she smiled politely. When I tried to talk seriously, she'd check the time or her phone. If I asked if something was wrong, she'd say, "Why do you always assume something's wrong?" That question shut everything down. She started spending more time helping a friend, a woman I'd never met. The story was always vague but consistent enough to sound real. Late dinners, long phone calls taken in the other room, weekend plans that didn't include me. I didn't push. I didn't want to be controlling. I didn't want to be that husband. Instead, I tried harder, cooked more, asked about her day, suggested small trips, date nights, anything to reconnect. She'd agree, then cancel last minute, always with the same calm apology. "Can we do this another time? I'm just exhausted." What bothered me wasn't the cancellations. It was the relief in her voice when she said them. One night, I came home early without telling her. The apartment was quiet, lights low. Her phone was on the table, unlocked. I wasn't snooping. I was walking past. A message preview caught my eye. I can't keep pretending around him. I froze, not because I finally knew what was happening, but because I realized something worse. She wasn't confused. She wasn't trapped. She was acting, and I was the part she was tired of playing against. I didn't confront her that night. I needed to understand just how deep this went. After that message, I stopped trying to fix things. I stopped offering solutions she didn't ask for. I started paying attention to what she did when she thought I wasn't watching. Her schedule became predictable. Late Tuesdays, helping a friend, Thursdays, weekends that filled up without discussion. When I asked questions, she answered calmly, confidently, like someone who'd rehearsed just enough to sound sincere. I noticed she'd started changing small details in her stories. Nothing obvious, just enough that I couldn't quite follow. One night, she said her friend lived across town. A week later, the same friend lived not far from here. When I pointed out casually, she laughed and said, "You're really keeping track, huh?" It sounded like a joke. It wasn't. A few days later, I did something I'd avoided doing for months. I checked our shared bank account, not because I suspected anything financial, just because something felt off. There were new charges I didn't recognize. Restaurants I'd never been to. Late-night rides. Always on the same days. She said she was busy. When I asked her about it, she didn't hesitate. "Work stuff," she said. "I'll expense it." She never did. That weekend, she said she needed space. Not in a dramatic way. Calmly. Reasonably. Like she'd already decided how this conversation would go. She suggested I stay with a friend just for a bit, so she could think. I agreed. While I was gone, a mutual acquaintance messaged me. Someone I hadn't spoken to in years. "Hey, random question," they wrote. "Are you and your wife still together?" I asked why. They replied, "Because she introduced someone else as her partner last night." My hands went cold. When I confronted her over the phone, she didn't deny it. She sighed and said, "You're making this more dramatic than it needs to be." That's when I realized this wasn't about an affair anymore. It was about how easily she'd replace me, and how long she'd been preparing to do it. After that call, I expected anger, guilt, panic, anything human. What I got was irritation. She told me I was embarrassing her, that I'd put her in an impossible position, that introducing someone else as her partner was just easier than explaining a complicated situation. According to her, the real problem wasn't what she'd done. It was how I reacted to it. When I came back to the apartment to talk in person, she acted like we were negotiating a misunderstanding, not the end of marriage. She spoke slowly, carefully, like she was managing a fragile client. "You've been distant for a long time," she said. I didn't feel supported. This didn't come out of nowhere. I asked her how long it had been going on. She didn't answer directly. She said, "Does the exact timeline really matter?" That was my answer. Over the next few days, I started noticing something else. People treated me differently. Friends checked in just to see how I was holding up. Her sister asked if I was getting help. The concern felt rehearsed. She'd already started explaining me. Every conversation I tried to have with her turned into a character assessment. I was emotionally unavailable, avoidant, bad at communication. Labels, not explanations. Each one designed to make the affair sound like a symptom, not a choice. I caught myself defending things I shouldn't have had to defend. My memory, my intentions, my sanity. That's when it hit me. This wasn't just about replacing me with someone else. She was replacing the version of me that could object. And the scariest part was how smoothly it was working. Because the more she spoke calmly, the more unstable I felt. The more she sounded reasonable, the more I started questioning myself. I realized then that if I kept engaging like this, I wasn't just going to lose my marriage. I was going to lose control of the story entirely. And once that happens, the truth stops mattering. Something changed after that realization. I stopped trying to convince her of anything. I didn't argue with the labels. I didn't correct her version of events. I didn't ask her to explain herself. I answered politely, briefly, like someone who already knew the conversation was over. That shift unsettled her. She asked why I was being so calm, said it felt detached, accused me of shutting down. I could tell she wanted a reaction, anger, sadness, anything she could point to and use. Instead, I started documenting. Quietly. Dates, messages, bank statements. Not to punish her, but to anchor myself in facts when everything else felt slippery. I also spoke to a lawyer, just once, not to file anything yet, but to understand where I stood, what mattered, what didn't, how easily narratives can turn into legal problems if you're not careful. That conversation grounded me more than anything else had. When I told her I needed clarity, not space, not vague apologies, just honesty, she sighed and said, "I don't know why you're making this so complicated." That sentence sealed it. Because if honesty feels like a burden to someone, it was never part of the plan. I told her I wasn't going to argue about the past anymore, that I wasn't interested in defending my character, that I needed to think about what kind of life I wanted moving forward. She stared at me like she didn't recognize me. For the first time, I wasn't reacting to her version of events. I was stepping outside of it. And once I did that, I could finally see the situation clearly. Not as a husband trying to save a marriage, but as someone deciding whether to stay in a story that no longer had room for him. After that, everything slowed down. She stopped pushing for conversations, stopped trying to explain herself. Instead, she acted like we were already in the after phase, polite, distant, careful, like someone waiting for the other person to accept what had already been decided. She suggested we stay civil, talked about being friends someday, about how life is complicated and people change. There was no apology for lying, only regret that things had become messy. I listened, and for the first time, I didn't feel the urge to respond. I made my decision quietly. I didn't announce it during an argument. I didn't threaten. I didn't ask for permission. I separated finances, packed essentials, and told her I was leaving when everything was already in motion. She looked surprised, not devastated. Surprised, like she assumed I'd keep trying longer, like she believed confusion would buy her more time. The weeks after were harder than I expected, but also clearer. I slept better, thought more clearly. I stopped replaying conversations in my head, stopped questioning my memory, stopped wondering if I'd imagined the warning signs. What I learned is this: betrayal doesn't always start with cheating. Sometimes it starts when someone slowly removes you from their life, while keeping you around for convenience. If you ever feel like you're constantly explaining yourself, constantly questioning your reactions, constantly being told you're making things complicated, pay attention. That's not misunderstanding. That's erosion. Walking away didn't feel like victory. It felt like choosing reality over comfort. And once I did, Everything finally became quiet enough to hear myself think again.